I want to switch gears to go to the TCPA issue very quickly, because this issue of auto dialer has come up. And in your order, you adopted a pretty broad definition of an auto dialer, although you acknowledged, and I quote, there are outer limits to the capacity of equipment to be an auto dialer, and there must be more than a theoretical potential that the equipment could be modified to satisfy the auto dialer definition. Is my iPhone an auto dialer?
No, sir.
Then let me ask you this. There are at least 3 apps that we've found, Dial My Calls, CallBot, Automated Calling, and Voxline, that would turn my iPhone into an auto dialer.
So the issue that we were trying to deal with in this order was not the hardware, but the impact. Because since Congress acted in 1991, the technology has changed, and what Congress's instructions to us is no contact from auto dialers without permission.
But my question though is, if I push somebody's name, Chairman Wheeler's, I don't ever dial your number. I just push Chairman Wheeler and it dials. To me, is that an auto dialer?
No, sir.
Okay, if I have a database of names that I want to reach out to, let's say voters, and I want to turn them out to vote, and I have a device that calls until somebody answers, and then I can take the call. Is that an auto dialer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I no longer can do that. If I have a teletown hall in my office, which I do, and there's some company that calls all those thousands of people in my district, are they now prohibited from doing this?
Unless the consumer has asked to get this. The statute is very explicit.
So teletown halls now by members of Congress, and most members do that, are now against?
All I'm doing is
no, I'm asking you the question.
No, sir. That's
right.
So
those are prohibited, and your contention has always have been?
Yes, sir.
Wow. That's interesting. That would be news to a lot of people. Commissioner Pai?
Mr. Chairman, I think part of the reason why it is indisputable that a smartphone is an auto dialer under the FCC's new interpretation is that if you look at the statute, it says a capacity to randomly or sequentially dial a number. I explicitly said capacity means the actual capacity. The smartphone has in itself, intrinsically, the ability to do that. The majority rejected my argument and said, no, you could download an app, there are all kinds of other things you could do to effectively make the smartphone an auto dialer, even if it isn't intrinsically. And that's part of the reason why literally every communications device, other than a rotary phone, I give the majority credit for accepting those, nonetheless is now subject to TCPA liability as an auto dialer. And that's not good for consumers, that's not good for providers, not good for anybody other than trial lawyers.
Well, and we're hearing from others out there who are, there's this issue with the healthcare exchanges and whether or not insurance companies can follow up and like notify you that it's time for you to come in and have some tests done. I've been told that may be prohibited now. I mean, are you aware of that? Are you hearing those?
That's the first I've heard of it, but it doesn't surprise me because now we've seen from a number of different industries, they're just uncertain about what the rules of the road are.
Yeah.
So understand what we were doing, Mr. Chairman, was responding to a series of petitions. We did not issue a rule. People petitioned us and said, what is the rule? What is your...
Right, but you interpreted.
And if somebody wants to petition us on the kinds of things you talk about, we can deal with that.
Right.
On the healthcare issue one, we specifically had an exemption for being able to bank fraud, healthcare, things like this, and for government agencies.
And with changing technology, 40% of Americans no longer have a landline, right?
Right.
I know you spoke out and said basically pollsters could go the way of, blacksmiths, I guess.
Well, they have been, right?
Well, I guess my point is, so that industry, in effect, in terms of trying to do a random sample, is now put out of business, in effect, right? How do you do a random sample on a poll if you can't randomly sample and dial?
So I once sat down with Peter Hart to write a piece exactly on that insofar as wireless, because you can't have random, you can't get to the wireless numbers. Right. You don't know what they are. So that went by the board. The issue here is if you come to us and you say the statute says, which it does, that the only folks who are allowed to be called are those who want to be called.
Got it.
And I'm supposed to be a strict constructionalist of the statute.
Well, we've seen some examples by the court where they would disagree with your interpretation of the statute on other issues, rather violently and directly.
And you are constantly encouraging me to be a strict constructionalist.
Well, I think we're just trying to figure out the impact of
I
your
understand.
ruling as it relates to, I've gone way beyond my time, but I'll now defer to my colleague from California, Ms. Eshu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's an important discussion, and I think that we need to talk about this some more, because it's what went into the statute was like holding a mirror up to the country at that time.
91, right?
In 91, that's a long time ago. That's many, many moons ago when you think of generations of how many generations of technology changes have taken place. So whether someone wants to be a strict constructionist or whatever, I think that we have to have the elasticity to stay up with the times. I mean, each one of us represents 750,000 people. Now, maybe we've got to reach out to every single one of them if we possibly can, but in my view, meeting with people relative to a telephone town hall meeting has been overwhelmingly embraced, not just accepted, but embraced by my constituents. Plus, it saves tons of money, and they get to just ask whatever they want. So these are, I don't think they'd be satisfied, well, this is what the statute says. I think they'd say, change whatever you have to change, but keep up with the changes that are taking place. So it's important.